Ancient Egypt is one of the most remarkable civilizations in human history, established over 5,000 years along the fertile banks of the Nile River located in northeastern Africa. Ito'y tinatawag na the Gift of the Nile by the Greek historian Herodotus. Egypt is rich and known for hieroglyphics, pyramids, temples, and mummies. The predictable flooding of the Nile enriched the soil, making large-scale agriculture. Ang mga tubig nito ay nagbigay hindi lamang ng pangkabuhayan, kundi pati na rin daanan ng kalakalan, komunikasyon at pagkakaisa sa mga taga-Egypt. Egypt was ruled by a theocratic monarchy, kung saan merong pharaoh that served as both king and god. The pharaoh was considered the living embodiment of Horus, the falcon god, and the son of Ra, the sun god.
In ancient Egypt, the economy was one of the strongest in the ancient world. It grew mainly because of the Nile River, which provided water and fertile land for farming. Natural resources. Ancient Egypt was rich in gold, copper, and stones like limestone and granite. These were used for trade and for building temples and pyramids. In agriculture, farming was the main source of food and income. Egyptians planted wheat, barley, and flax along the Nile, and their harvests supported the whole kingdom. In ancient Egypt, industry included making pottery, jewelry, clothes, and tools which were traded in nearby lands. The Egyptian pound. The Egyptian pound is the official currency of Egypt. It is used for buying goods, trading, and daily transactions. In ancient times, Egyptians traded goods like grain or gold, but today the Egyptian pounds represents the country's modern economy.
Language. In ancient times, Egyptians used hieroglyphics. Hieroglyphs are characters in the form of pictures that constitute a writing system. The word hieroglyph means sacred carving, comes from the Greek term for the gods' words. Hieroglyphs can be read as pictures, symbols for objects, or symbols for sounds. Hieroglyphs were carved on walls, tombs, and papyrus scrolls. Religion. Egyptian religion was polytheistic. This means they believe in many gods and goddesses, not just one, around 2,000 in total, and each god has specific role. Example, Anubis, god of mummification and afterlife. So basically, every god or goddess had their own special duty and responsibility. Like Anubis, god of mummification and afterlife. Egyptians believe in an afterlife. Life continues after death. The ancient Egyptians believed that when they died, their spiritual body would continue to exist in an afterlife very similar to their living world. They also needed their bodies, and so they were preserved or mummified after they died. That's why they practiced mummification to prepare the soul for the next life. They also built temples to honor gods, offered gifts and prayers, reenacted myths, and warded off chaos.
Good day, everyone. Now let's proceed to discovering the world of ancient Egyptian farmers, their tools, animals, and how they work with the natural rhythm of the mighty Nile River. Most villagers in ancient Egypt were farmers. They lived in both the countryside and in small towns, depending entirely on the river Nile for their livelihood. Every year, the Nile would flood, leaving behind nutrient-rich black silt called kemet, which turned the desert soil into fertile farmland. These farmers didn't just grow food, they sustained the entire civilization, from feeding the workers who built the pyramids to supplying grain to be stored in massive state granaries. The ancient Egyptians grew a variety of crops. The most important was grain, especially wheat and barley, because grain made bread, porridge, and beer staples of the Egyptian diet. But their fields didn't stop there. They planted vegetables like onions, garlic, leeks, and lettuce, fruits like figs, pomegranates, and melons that were grown in gardens and along pathway for both shade and sweet snacks. They also grew flax, which was used to make linen for clothes. It shows that Nile didn't just give them water, it gave them life. Egyptian farming followed the rhythm of the Nile, divided into three main seasons. First is the Aket from June to September. It is called the flooding season. During this time, fields were underwater, no farming was done. Instead, farmers often work on state projects like building temples and pyramids. Next is the peret from October to February. It is the growing season. As the water receded, it left behind fertile soil. This was planting time. Farmers ploughed their fields, sowed seed, and irrigated crops. Lastly is the Shemu from March to May, which is the harvest season. This was the busiest time. Crops were harvested by hand, grain was stored, and irrigation canals were cleaned and repaired for the next cycle. Now let's proceed to the farming tools of the time. Wooden plows pulled by oxen loosened the soil. Hoes and rakes that helped them with planting and clearing. Sickles with flint blades that they used to cut grain. Winnowing scoops that separated grain from chaff after harvest. Everything was made from local materials like wood, flint, and reeds, efficient, practical, and perfectly suited for their needs. Shaduf, the ingenious water lifting tool. It was an amazing Egyptian invention used to lift water from the Nile or irrigation canals up into the fields. It's a long pole balanced on a beam with a bucket on one end and a weight on the other. Farmers would pull the rope, fill the bucket, and then swing the water onto higher ground. It was an early form of irrigation and shows how Egyptians used simple machines to solve big problems. Farm animals were also essential to their farm, like oxen and cattle that pulled flocks, goats and pigs that cleaned up leftover grain, ducks and geese that were raised for eggs and meat.
So now, I am discussing the ancient Egyptian medicine. They believe diseases were caused by gods or spirits. Nag-provide ako ng tatlong example dito, which is si Sekhmet, si Heka, at si Wekhedu. Marami pa sila, pero based on my research, ito yung pinaka-common. They used prayers and natural remedies like herbs. Diba, sabi ko kanina naniniwala sila sa mga espirito, tsaka sa mga gods. So, meaning naniniwala din sila na ang dasal at mga halamang gamot yung makakapagpagaling sa kanila. May binigay akong example dito, garlic and onion, cumin and coriander, at frankincense and myrrh. The earliest evidence of medical care began in ancient Egypt. So, sinusulat nila yon sa papyrus, nililista nila, tapos, pinapasa nila sa next generation yung process ng kanilang paggamot. So, nagbigay ako ng dalawang example dito, yung Ebers Papyrus at Kahun Gynecological Papyrus. Circumcision was a common practice in Egypt, but the evidence of female circumcision is unclear and possibly a mistranslation. So, ang mga Egyptian kasi noon, naniniwala sila na sumisimbolo ng kalinisan ang circumcision o pagtutuli. Well, hanggang ngayon naman. Pero, hindi pa malinaw kung pati yung babae ay tinutulian din. Hanggang ngayon ay pinagdedebatehan pa rin ng mga scholar yung ideya na pati babae ay tinutulian. So ngayon, i-discuss ko naman is about surgery. Trauma surgery, fractures, wounds, dislocations is well attested. But internal surgery for non-trauma conditions is less clearly supported. Naniniwala kasi yung mga Egyptian noon na sagrado ang katawan ng tao. Kaya hindi sila nagpe-perform ng internal operation. So, di rin nila alam kung paano gumagana, nagpa-function yung mga internal organ natin. Wala pa silang pag-aaral about doon. They used bandage with plants like willow leaves to heal. Gaya na sinabi ko kanina, naniniwala nga sila sa herbal medicine, kaya yun din yung ginagamit nila sa paghihilom ng mga sugat nila. So, no deep surgery due to lack of anesthetics and antiseptics. Wala pa silang na-invento noon na mga pampangini or pampamanhid. Wala pa yung anesthesia nung panahon nila. Kaya hindi rin sila nagpa-perform ng ganong surgery.
In ancient Egyptians, they use hieroglyphic numbers, and it is a base 10 system, but instead of using digits from 0 to 9, they had different symbols for each power of 10, wherein they use 7 symbols. 1 is shown by a single stroke, 10 is shown by a drawing of a hobble for cattle or upside down U. 100 is represented by a coil of rope, 1000 a drawing of a lotus plant. 10,000 is represented by a finger, 100,000 a tadpole or frog. 1,000,000 is a figure of a god with arms raised above his head. In reading and writing numbers, the higher number is always written in front of the lower number, and where there is more than one row of numbers, the reader should start at the top.
Sickle, a curved blade perfect for harvesting wet and barley. Even with simple materials, it got the job done. Irrigation canals. Egyptian builds complex network of canals and ditches to move Nile water to dry fields, turning deserts into farmland. The shadow, a mechanical irrigation system that allowed them to raise water efficiently with minimal labor.
The Egyptians were among the first to practice medical surgery. They already had knowledge about treating different injuries like sa ulo, leeg, balikat, dibdib. They even listed the surgical tools they use, tulad ng needle and thread para tahiin ang sugat, and other materials like lint, swabs, bandages, adhesive plaster at surgical stitches. They also practice cauterization or yung pag-burn ng sugat to stop bleeding. It's also the earliest record that studies the brain. Ibig sabihin, interesado na sila sa kung papaano gumagana ang utak noon pa man. Sa Cairo Museum, makikita mo pa rin yung mga ancient surgical instrument nila, tulad ng scalpel, scissors, copper needles, forceps, spoons, lancets, hooks, probes, and pincers. Cosmetic makeup. Invented around 4000 BC, Egyptians were the first to create and wear eye makeup. Sila ang unang nakadiscover ng eye makeup and they used natural materials used by both men and women. Believed it could protect them from disease and ward off the evil eye. Hindi lang women but also men din. They believe it will keep them from falling from the victim of evil eye. Black makeup, called or mesdemet, made from soot and galena, lead material used for eyeliner and brows. Nilalagay nila sa paligid ng mata at kilay para mas malinaw at ma-emphasize ang mata. Green makeup, made from malachite, copper mineral, used mostly during the Old Kingdom period. Ito naman yung green version wherein nilalagay naman nila ito sa ilalim ng mata bilang design at protection. When it comes to application naman, small sticks made of wood, bronze, or glass were used to apply makeup. Purpose: for beauty, sun protection, and health benefits. The lead-based minerals help reduce bacteria and sun glare. Symbolic meaning: Egyptians believe beauty started with eyes, calling them windows to the soul. Kaya importante sa kanila ang pag-aalaga at pagpapaganda ng mata. Many Egyptians shaved their heads, especially during summer. They did this para mapanatiling malinis at maiwasan ang mga lice, since ang weather sa Egypt ay mainit. Priests stay bald as their part of religious purity. For them, ang pagiging bald ay nagsisimbolize ng cleanliness and purity while performing temple rituals. Wigs protected natural hair from lice and the sun. Hindi lang siya basta for fashion or aesthetic purposes, but nakakatulong ang wig para mapanatiling clean and free from lice ang hair. And it protected their head sa mainit na climate ng Egypt. Wealthy Egyptians wore wigs made from human hair or plant fibers, styled from beeswax and animal fat. Yung mga rich Egyptians, afford nila ang high-quality wigs, and yung mga wigs ay made from real human hair or sometimes plant fibers. Both men and women wore wigs and hair extensions decorated with gold rings or ornaments. Hindi lang siya for women, but men can wear it too. They decorated it with gold rings and jewelry to show beauty, wealth, and high social status.
Another toothpaste recipe and brushing guide was found on a papyrus from 4th century AD. So, it described how to mix rock salt, mint, dried iris flower, and grains of pepper to create powder for white and perfect teeth. Papyrus. Papyrus was a plant that the Egyptians used to make woods for building ships. So, yung mga Egyptian daw, yung papyrus, ginagamit nila yon para gumawa ng mga barko noong panahon nila. It was also used to make paper for writing religious idea, records, and books. So, yung papyrus, parang papel nila yon. O, papel nila yon. So, doon nila sinusulat yung mga ideas nila, yung mga records, tsaka yung gaya ng sinabi ko kanina, na doon sinusulat yung mga medical records nila, tsaka yung recipe kung paano gawin yung herbal medicine, ganon.
Mummification. Mummification was the process used by ancient Egyptians to preserve the bodies of the dead. They believed it helped the soul reach the afterlife. The body was cleaned, organs were removed, and it was wrapped in linen cloth before being placed in a tomb. Black ink. Ancient Egyptians made black ink from soot mixed with water and gum. They used it to write on papyrus scrolls for recording religious texts, laws, and daily life. Black ink symbolized the life and rebirth in their culture.